Chapter 8. Over the course of his life, Vane had been placed in the care of 3 judges. Farinas held the longest post, serving as his guardian and surrogate father for his first 15 years, but then Gramis insisted that Vane join the Arcadian armed services, as was the Solidar tradition, and Farinas was killed in his defense. This was neither the first nor the last of many tragedies that Vane held his father accountable for, but the hatred that followed his mourning was thankfully cut short by the appointment of Judge Zecht as a replacement. While Farinas had been a family man, Zecht was most definitely a military man, and allowed no weakness on his own part or Vane's. They became fast friends and made all manner of mischief, which grew exponentially with Monty's arrival, but after 7 years of servitude, it became clear that Zecht longed for the battlefield. As dearly as he loved the Solidar princes, politics bored him half to death. For this reason, Vane arranged a transfer, placing Zecht at the head of a ground fleet where he belonged and placing his current guardian, Judge Bergen, at his side as both bodyguard and political advisor where he belonged. Monty had 2 judges assigned to him, Drace and Gabranth. This, however, was not due solely to Gramis's favoritism, but was instead heavily reliant on Monty's rather remarkable ability to get himself into unheard of amounts of trouble. Gabranth was the lower ranking, sent to work under Drace's command when the prince began to crawl, or as one might rather put it, when he began to disappear. It was intended to be something of an insult. The young, foreign newcomer put on babysitting duty, a joke widely enjoyed among the other judges, but he took great pride in his position, for the lack of prestige was clearly unimportant to him when overshadowed by the happiness Monty generated. Drace in particular had been merciless toward the Landesian until witnessing firsthand his aptitude for fatherhood. Monty loved him, and that was enough to keep him around. Drace was the second oldest of the judges who personally guarded the Solidars, younger only than Guise, and had in her time watched over both empresses. Gramis trusted her unwaveringly, even to the point of assigning her to Monty's security within an hour of his birth, without even consulting Vane. Vane himself did not know her very well, and did not think she particularly liked him, or liked anyone, but he had seen her fight and had nothing but respect for that tenacity. She was a high-born Arcadian, a judge before he ever existed, and he had been told to trust her, by Gramis, by Farinas, by Zecht, by Monty even, but for the last 2 years this had been difficult. She permitted Gabranth to remain in Monty's cortege. Only she and Gramis had the power to do this, and after he abandoned his country for its conqueror, even after he betrayed his own brother, she trusted him with Monty's care. Vane found this unsettling, to say the least. Worse was the ambush at the Fete. Vane knew the way the Senate thought, and if anyone had the guts to agree to such a plot, it would be Drace. But there was no proof, of course, and there probably never would be, but he still comforted himself with the diligence of his paranoia. It had kept him alive this long, at least. Yet he feared that Drace may not be his only worry as of late, for the Senate had insisted he allow the people of Rabanastre to welcome him with the extravagant party, knowing full well the peril it would put him in. He had long suspected that the senators had plans for his brother, but he would never have guessed that they would act while he remained so young. Indeed, he had always thought they would allow the boy to grow a bit first, to poison him against his father and brother, before staging the coup that would make him their precious political toy. But this played in Vane's favor, for he had seen his father's will, and knew for a fact that it excluded Monty. When the old man finally passed, the child and the country would be in Vane's care, and the Senate would hold no sway over either, leaving Drace and Gabranth his only obstacles. At the moment, however, he could do little to affect his country's future, for he remained stuck in Rabanastre, fighting day and night to earn some respect. The Eighth Fleet was due to arrive any moment, which he hoped would lighten the situation, but for now he remained pacing in the king's office, biting his tongue, while Drace reported the day's happenings in her usual patronizing tone. Though the repairs to the palace, and his reputation, had thus far gone well, he found himself unable to contain his feelings for the Senate and their petty games, but figured he may as well give Drace some warning that he was on to her.
Those decrepit, basking fools in Arcades tie my hands, and look what happens. I tell you, this country's obstinacy knows no bounds. The senators could not have known this would happen,
she assured him.
Do you really think them that ignorant?
He replied.
I've no doubt they are stewing in disappointment at my survival this very moment. Then perhaps it would be wiser to disarm them before confronting them.
He rolled his eyes.
What do you think Father's been trying to do the last 2 years?
Highness, Drace explained dryly, clearly enjoying his dismay,
the insurgents in Rabanastre operate alone at present, but should they garner external support, the situation could worsen. Once you get them out of your way, you will be safer to go about assisting your father in fulfilling his ambitions. More easily said than done.
She shifted slightly, placing her hands elegantly behind her back.
We have found the counter-imperial elements in Bougerbe to be conspicuously well-funded. No doubt Marquis Andor is behind it, why not start with him? The Marquis has written us a letter,
Vane replied.
He claims that he's recaptured our runaway. He's given him to Guise.
He pulled the letter in question from within his vest and tossed on the desk.
Guise would do well to give him to Gabranth,
Drace said stiffly.
Speaking of fraternity, the prince continued, shouldn't there be something short, sweet, and exceptionally petible bouncing around here by now? The Leviathan is still in docking,
said Drace.
Last I heard, Master Lamont was getting a good tongue-lashing from Guise. Oh, God, what did he do now? Nothing his honor wasn't asking for, I'm sure. Listen,
Vane said concernedly.
I don't want Monty involved in all of this nonsense. If he asks, the Leviathan stopped in Bougerbe to refuel.
She nodded.
And Gabranth? Simply running errands in the city, nothing more. I understand.
He gave his order not a moment too soon, for in that instant a pair of soldiers entered the office, escorting Monty and the ever-scheming Dr. Sid.
Vane. Monty.
The boy practically leapt at Vane, and he dropped to one knee to pull him in and rough him up, effectively breaking the density of the atmosphere. They began scruffing each other's hair with borderline violence, laughing so heartily that the soldiers each did a double take before exiting. Dr. Sid got a kick out of the display, always pleased with the less dignified habits of royalty, and even Drace seemed to release the dourness of her being in some small amount.
Speak of the devil,
she mused, placing a hand on her steel-plated hip.
Hey, Drace,
Monty replied with a bright smile.
Look at you!
Vane exclaimed, grabbing Monty's shoulders and holding him back to take a good look.
How'd you get so tall?
Practice, Monty replied matter-of-factly. Vane laughed.
I swear, you get bigger every time I see you. Smarter, too,
Sid stated with fatherly pride.
The lad is fast on his way to putting me out of business. Oh, I believe it,
replied Vane.
We finally made workable nethysite,
Monty reported giddily.
We won't have to mine it anymore. Well, that's for the future to see, Sid added. Still plenty of kinks to work out, you know. And I'm sure you two will have fun doing so,
said Vane, rising and smoothing his hair back into place.
Father will be so proud to have a scientist in the family. Speaking of family,
Sid went on,
you may soon have a sister-in-law. What?
Monty exclaimed.
Gross. Don't tell me you have a girlfriend.
Vane asked with a smirk.
I don't.
The boy insisted.
She's just a friend who's a girl.
Vane folded his arms knowingly.
Yes, that's how they start. Supposedly she lives here in your city,
Sid explained.
I would think a proper introduction is in order. Absolutely not.
Monty snapped. Sid laughed.
What? You want to wait until you've outgrown her?
And Monty scowled slightly, trying far too hard to speak beyond his years.
Age is just a number. Ah, older.
Vane mused, musing the boy's hair once more.
Good work, little brother.
Monty groaned, and Drace finally stepped in.
Oh, quit embarrassing him. We're not going to terrify the poor girl for sport. You'll give her a week to mount her defense, right?
Monty asked.
I was thinking too,
she replied,
but if you think one will do.
This got a laugh out of him, but he quickly changed the subject while the chance was upon him.
Where's Gabranth? He had some work to do,
said Drace.
What kind of work?
He pressed.
Nothing important,
she explained.
He'll be back late tomorrow night. Drace. Yes. I'm 10, not stupid.
Drace looked to Vane for further instruction, but he merely tilted his head back and groaned audibly. Sid laughed.
It has something to do with the resistance, doesn't it?
Monty went on.
Now how would you know about that?
Vane asked, folding his arms.
Word gets around,
Monty defended. At this, Sid stepped in knowingly.
It seems the Honorable Judge Famran has returned. Don't be ridiculous,
said Vane.
I just sent him to prison. Yes, well,
Sid mused,
he always was an unruly little buck. He was working for GHIs.
Monty explained, taking the dusk shard from his pocket and offering it up to his brother.
Brought him this.
Vane's eyes widened as he slowly took the stone.
My God! The dusk shard, right? I believe so. I didn't even know it was missing.
Monty smiled with a shrug, granting Vane the relief of knowing that he had bought the lie.
Thank you, Monty. This could have buried my credibility. What would you do without me?
Monty replied with a laugh.
Nothing, well, at least,
he answered.
Now, I know you just got here, but Sid and I have some work to finish up. Why don't you go get settled, and later on I'll show you around the palace. All right.
He headed for the door with Drace at his side, but looked over his shoulder before exiting.
But you'd better not have any fun without me.
Vane shook his head with a smile.
Not possible.
Monty grinned back and finally left, leaving what felt to be a still dimness in his wake. Vane's eyes lingered on the closed door for a moment, while Sid folded his arms with a pleasant smile.
Ah, youth is so endearing. And tiring,
Vane added, handing him the dusk shard. He took it casually and placed it in his pocket.
Win some, lose some, as they say. He really befriended a Dalmascan girl. Seems so. I've not met her, but I've certainly heard an earful about her.
Noting the prince's suddenly sour countenance, he continued with uneasy assurance,
This could be good for you, make peace with the occupied.
Vane glared.
That wasn't my concern, Sid. How is it that a royal prince should have any contact with a foreign peasant, let alone enough to give you an earful about? He slipped his guards again, of course,
the doctor explained with a shrug.
Drace and Gabranth are at least wise to his methods, Geese didn't stand a chance.
And now Vane briefly closed his eyes to keep himself from rolling them.
For all your brilliance, you certainly seem to lack logic. One of these days that little rascal is going to wander off and never come back. And who do you think father will suspect? Well, given your track record. Sid. Apologies, lad, but Vena's been rather hung up on it lately. Leave Vena out of this,
Vane groaned, shaking his head. Sid glanced over his shoulder with a look of expectation and spoke to the empty air.
You heard the man.
A pause, and then.
Damn it, I'm getting to that. Never a moment's peace with you, is it?
Vane regarded him with a condescending look of weariness.
Sid, please. Not my fault,
Sid defended.
Vena, take a vacation.
A moment of silence settled, and then Sid turned to Vane with amazement.
By God, it worked. Look,
Vane went on sternly.
Monty has tight security for a reason. I am not without respect for your work, but you must stop encouraging him. I told him not to go off without asking permission. Ask permission he will do, it's getting permission that he's not so good at.
Sid sighed.
Yes, I know. Curiosity and the cat, I'll see what I can do, but if this new friend of his isn't too intimidated by all the trappings of royalty, he may soon lose interest anyway. Oh, don't talk like that,
Vane said dismally.
When I'm emperor, my first order of business will be to marry him off to some Rosarian princess and be done with it. Harsh. It's for his own good. Ah, harsh but true.
Vane shook his head, turning to the great window behind him and looking out over the courtyard.
I won't have him drafted into the army to boost father's pride, or forced on the throne to be manipulated by the Senate. He'll enjoy his job as I enjoy mine. I sure hope so,
Sid replied.
You were kept waiting fully 2 years. Patience really does pay off,
he said, quickly growing bored with watching the workers below repair the stonework that had been destroyed during the fete.
So, what news of Arcades? I hope our honored friends in the Senate haven't been giving you too much trouble. Oh, they're hard at work as always,
said Sid.
Trying to find a dagger for your back.
Vane smiled.
They're welcome to try,